Today we have an incredible guest, someone whose work has shaped the way we understand childhood, parenting and masculinity. Steve Biddulph is one of the world's most influential psychologists and parenting educators. For over 4 decades, his books like Raising Boys, Raising Girls and The New Manhood have helped millions of families understand how to raise emotionally healthy, resilient children. He's been a pioneer in challenging outdated ideas of masculinity, shining a light on the pressures boys face, and offering parents a roadmap to raising kind, confident and emotionally intelligent men. In this conversation, we'll explore the biggest challenges facing boys today, from mental health struggles to toxic online influences, and what we as parents can do to guide them towards a healthy, positive sense of masculinity. Steve's wisdom is both practical and deeply compassionate, and I know you're all going to take away so much from this episode. Steve, thank you so much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Hi, Jolie and Elliot and everybody listening. It's fantastic to have a chance to talk to you.
So everyone knows it's 10 p.m. here in the UK and it's 9 a.m. in Tasmania where you are. So Steve's feeling all full of vigour and ready to go.
Thanks for staying up late for me.
Don't be silly. I'd stay up late for you any day, Steve. Right, let's dive in. In Raising Boys, you talk about 3 key stages of boyhood. Can you walk us through them and explain why understanding these phases is so important for parents?
Sure. And first, something I really have to explain is that I don't ever talk or write as some kind of expert. I think experts are a terrible thing in the parenting world. And so the things that I'll be offering today are just things to try on. And if they fit, that's really great. And if they don't, just toss them out. It's totally fine. Because what I started doing when I became a psychologist 40 years ago was I just hung out with parents, first of all in a clinic and then in small groups and then eventually with 500 or 1,000 parents at a time. That was my day job.
Yeah.
And so I've probably been talking to more parents than anyone else on the planet. And so you get a feeling of what people need, and then you go and look for it to find out what might help. So it's a kind of anti-expert. It's kind of like, here's what I found. Is this any use? And if people really like it, then it goes into the books. And so really Raising Boys was written by the 30,000 parents that I talked to at that stage. And so the 3 stages of boyhood that you ask about, Jolie, are turned out to be one of the things people really, really liked. They found it helpful. And I think it's always the case with raising kids or anything. It just helps to have a map. And a map tells you kind of, where to aim for and where to steer and where to get through. And so the 3 stages are very, very simple. It's no problem to remember. It's 0 to 6, 6 to 14, and 14 to 25. And the 25 keeps getting stretched out further because boyhood seems to last quite a long time, but we can talk about that later. But it means that as a family, you're planning what to do with your time and your resources and what to aim for long term. You kind of know what's going to be needed when. Does that sort of make sense?
Oh, it does make sense. And those stages really make sense to me as well. Yeah.
That's great. So for people listening, I'll say what they actually are. What's going on now is that from 0 to 6 is the little boy years, where little boys, even more than girls, are very tender and very needing of affection, and they're learning to love. And it's always variable, and everything we'll be saying today in the podcast, it can be the complete reverse of whether it's dad or it's mum or boys and girls. There's lots of overlap. But generally, little boys are in their mum's world from 0 to 6. And they're learning from mum to both to be loved and to love back and to love life. And so dads can play a huge role, and they can even be the primary carer. which is one of the great things about human beings. We're very flexible in what we can do. But most often, relative to mum, a dad is like light entertainment in the in the first 6 years. And so what has to happen is to be able to make it possible for mums and boys to be as chilled as possible, so they feel safe. They feel like there are supports around them, and that no one's hassling them, so that they can settle into that sweet time of being with a little child. Because boys' mental health seems to be a bit more fragile, and need to be really, really sense of peace and safety. And then at 6, there's a thing that happens, and these are kind of hormonal kind of stages. And because when I was young, I traveled a lot in my late teens. I lived in Papua New Guinea in the rainforest with kind of tribal situations, hunter-gatherer situations, and I was always interested. How come other people do such a good job of raising their kids to be so, 6-year-olds in Papua New Guinea would be looking after 1-year-olds and doing it really, really well, for example. At the age of 6, there's a change that happens. And when I tell my audiences this, everyone nods their heads. Little boys seem to notice their dad. And they kind of, you picture it, it's like a little boy's holding on to mum, holding on to mum's hand. She's the kind of the bedrock of his life. But she's just always there, she's taken for granted sort of thing by this stage. And so he's holding on to mum, but he's looking at dad, and pulling dad in. And I think what happens is it's just dawning on him, I'm male. I'm going to turn into a man, and I have to study how to do that. And how do you do male? But whatever happens, somehow little boys kind of gravitate much more. They want to be with their dad and go places with him. And one of the things that we say to dads is, this is your window. It's at the age of 6, a little boy thinks his dad is Superman. He thinks he's amazing. And if you're a dad listening to this, of course you want your son to have your values and have your standards and qualities, philosophy of life and things like that. This is your moment, because from 6 to 14, he will want to be with you. And that doesn't last forever. Because what happens at 14 is this is the testosterone peak. Testosterone starts to kick up at 13, and its first impact is to make you, but it's very disruptive. It makes you kind of dopey and disorganized as it starts to creep up. So 13-year-olds are just hopeless. They're just totally hopeless. But at 14, the testosterone levels in a boy's bloodstream have increased by 800%.
Wow.
That I can see your eyebrows hitting the roof there.
and that's the most testosterone a boy will ever have in his body at the age of 14.
Yes, it's the most he will ever have. And what it does is it makes them twitchy. And it's like they're jumping out of their skin. And even argumentative. We say a 14-year-old boy will argue with a road sign.
Great. I'm really looking forward to this, Steve. I've got an 11-year-old. So
it's the main thing to realize is that however great, whether it's two dads raising a boy or two mums, or a dad and a mum, or a mum on her own, it's still the same thing. That at 14, the boy feels like he needs a wider pool to draw on. See, we got the world got very confused about what masculinity was, as if it's something that resides inside the person somehow, and different people have different amounts. It's not that. What masculinity is, it's a river, and the river flows through the culture. And if the boys receive a healthy, broad, tender, brave sense of masculinity, they bundle that into themselves, and that becomes theirs. Now, no dad is ever what a boy always only wants. Dads and sons often are a real mismatch. The dad's a real academic and the boys wants to do sport, or the boy's very physical and the dad's a sporting guy and the boy just wants to paint or do ballet. And it's almost guaranteed that they won't match. And so, and we do our, through love, we find common ground. But we're sensing, every dad senses, look, I know I'm just not all my son needs. And so, and Elliot, I see you nodding your head to that, and love to hear what you think. But I'll just finish this bit off and we can see what you think. We go looking. What we have to do is look for other male figures who will flesh out and broaden out. So the gay man next door, or the guitar teacher who's really, really great with kids and encouraging them, and the terrific school teacher, and one of the uncles that's just really clicks with them, so that when a boy doesn't want to have anything to do with his dad, the dads and the sons all go away, and so your son can talk to other kids' dads, and you talk to their, and so we create a community from 14 to 25. It's usually the stage we miss. We just boot our boys into the world, and they are not, at 14, they are so not ready. That we have to build in masculine supports for that final stepping stone into manhood, which is carried by the other men, and with dad on the sidelines, just keeping an eye that it's all okay. And so there's that, like, it's 3 bounces: mom, dad, mentors, manhood.
Yeah. Steve, do you think I definitely agree with that in regards to, like, no dad can just be everything. That's an unreasonable request. That's a really difficult task. But at the same time, do you feel like a lot of dads are comfortable with admitting that, and comfortable with actually seeking other men to be mentors and figures to their sons? I feel like a lot of men may have too much pride and ego to admit that maybe they can't be everything. What have you found in your experience?
Yeah, well, this is the bigger question of why are men so messed up, which was really the mission of my life. I was only about 27, a young family therapist, when I just, like, why are the men so messed up? The women are doing pretty well. And what it is that this thing we uncovered in the 20th century that's called the father wound. And sometimes I will have 100 men, and it's similar to what the work you do, I think, Elliot. You get 100 men in the room, and they're there to learn about fatherhood. And I put the question to the men when they've settled in and they're kind of just starting to lower their defenses a little bit. I say, you're here because you want to be a good dad. How do you get along with your own dad? And it's like I've got a hand grenade out of my briefcase, lobbed it into the room. The reaction, how do I get on with my own dad? Some of the men look like thunder, and they kind of spit it out. I don't, I don't get along with my own dad. I don't waste my time. And if you have a show of hands, and I'd be, just get people listening to predict what'll happen here, what the numbers will be out of 100 men. Who's estranged from their father? How many men never speak to him? It's 30% of the men. Almost a third of the men. They're completely estranged from their own dads. Shocking figure. Another 30 out of 100 will say, oh yeah, well, I see him at birthdays and Easter and things, and, but it's always a bit prickly. He's always having a go at you or something. And so they've got a relationship, but it's cactus. And what have we got left? We've got another 30% who are dutiful. So they show up, they discuss the football, can't wait to get away, visit the nursing home once a month, that kind of, it's better than nothing. If I was in a nursing home, it would be better than nothing. But if you're doing your maths now, we've got 10% of men left, and these guys always wait till the last before they speak. And then they say, well, I understand what the other guys are saying, but in fact, my old man is amazing. He's a fantastic dad, and they have tears in their eyes when they say it. You know, I couldn't design a better dad than my dad is. And if I have problems or worries, I would always, go and talk to my dad. And it's not that we always agree, but it's that he's on my side. And so if we go back to the big picture, that we've got 90 out of 100 men have a father wound, and they're not close to him. And so their own fathering lacks that kind of sense of steady confidence to both to hold their child and, as you asked, Elliot, to let go of their child and trust that he'll be back. He won't love you less.
I can feel myself tearing up as you're saying that. I think I'm lucky enough to be in that 10%. And we do actually a similar kind of exercise. We ask the dads about who's in their support network, and they have to fill out an 11-a-side football team with their support network. And then we flip it at the end and say, do you think if your child wrote their support network that you would be in it? And that question is always like, oh, would I? Would I be in my child's support network? So what you're saying there is very emotional, very, very emotional.
Do you think a lot of it is sort of generational trauma, Steve? Do you think it's just being handed down from man to man to man?
Yes, Jolie, that explains exactly. Men got hammered in the 20th century, and as we know from being Yorkshire kids, there were wars, there was industrialization that took the men down mines and pits and factories, and it was trauma after trauma after trauma. My granddad was in the trenches at the Somme. He was not a very relaxing man to be around for my dad. My dad was a million miles better than that in his warmth and affection. But he had a lot of trouble with language. He couldn't put words together. So it was great when we were little, but not so good with our teenage years. And so you're right. We had no idea how much traumatized and wounded men were. But in spite of that, we have turned around fatherhood. Elliot's generation are just so different. And if you can, and this is kind of my therapist speaking, if you can examine your own wounds, you will not wound your own children. And I think that's true for mums as just as much. When you can say, yeah, my dad belted me and I hated it and I hated him. And it was awful. Then if that's conscious and it's really there and you're feeling the pain of that, there's no way you could belt your kids. And even though the impulse would come up, my wife Sharon was belted a lot as a little girl, and she said when our little kids were just born and just growing up, she could feel the belting reflex come into her shoulder. Like she could feel it there. Because that's what happened every time when she was little, and startling to experience. Okay, that's where that comes from, and there is no way. And so we vowed as a young couple, and we worked for years in this space, helping people to not belt their kids. It was good therapy for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I asked people if they had a specific question for you when I knew we were interviewing you, and it was astonishing how many mothers messaged me and said, I'm either still with the father of my children or not with the father of my children, and I'm worried about the influence he is having on my sons, because for some of them, they had split up with the father of the children. He now had gone full red pill. He was in the manosphere. He had become a misogynist who wasn't a very nice person. For others, they said they were still with their partner, but their partner shouted a lot at their children, struggled with emotion and affection, and they were worried that that was going to pass to their sons. And they asked me to ask you about that. What do they do in that situation? Particularly, I really felt for the single parents who were saying, I have joint custody and I have no control over what's happening to my sons when he's with the father. And I'm really worried about it.
Yeah. Okay. This is a really, really important question. But the main thing to say is that since you were at one stage married to that controlling man, and living with him, with your child, good on you for getting out of there. The best thing you could have ever done for your kids was to get away from that. And so the 3/4 of the job is done. Now, the remaining quarter, of course, is a source of great pain, that he goes to be with his dad, and his dad is feeding him this kind of poison. And so let me just paint a picture for everyone. I worked with a little boy once who would travel between his mum's and his dad's house, and he would go on foot, and he was about 8 years old. He would walk to dad's house on the weekends and come back with his little suitcase walking. And there was a paling fence on the way, and the paling fence had 20 palings, and the little boy would count 10 palings, and then he would move into dad mode, and he would count the next 10 palings and be off to his dad's house, because he knew, and kids know this, and they can do this even at 8. The rules are different at dad's house. I won't get hit at mum's, I'll get hit at dad's. I can joke with mum, I can't joke with dad. And so if you're the parent who is the one who is the safe haven, and it could be either gender, but if you're the one who's the safe haven, then you can prepare your child and say, Jeremy, I know when you're with your dad, you'll have to do things just to get along, and maybe even say things just to get along. And I know that you can do that, and it's totally fine, because you've got to get through the weekend. And there's some really good things about your dad, as well as some mixed up things. He's not a bad person deep down. And so if you have really good fun with him and you have nice times with him, I'm really happy about that. But I disagree with your dad about this stuff. And so I don't think people should control other people on any basis, gender or any other basis. I treat you kindly, and I treat you with respect, and you treat me with respect. And that's why we were able to be close and safe with each other. That's why I wasn't able to be close and safe with your dad when he used to yell and try and control me. And so have a great weekend with your dad. If there's things you're uncomfortable about, we'll talk about them when you get back home. And we'll get through this together. And when you're 18, you'll be able to choose where you go and when, and make up your own mind. This is the second time I'm feeling teary in the first. We've only been here for half an hour.
You're going to set me off.
Yeah. Is this making sense, guys? Is that too big an ask for that idea of, you help your kid to adapt?
Yeah. I mean, when you say it, you just picture. I mean, I'm still with the partner of my children, but I just couldn't imagine having to do that and know that the discomfort and the pain that it would cause me to send my child off to somebody who I'd lost all trust in and faith in would be really tough. I mean, that is great advice, and I think it will give a lot of people a lot of comfort. If you're still with somebody, if you still live with them, you're still in a relationship with them, but you feel maybe they are traumatized from their relationship with their dad, and as the mother, you believe they're passing it on to the son, what advice would you give in that scenario?
Yeah. This is a really subtle or tricky sort of thing, because I don't think that it's women's jobs or wives' jobs to fix the mental health of husbands. I'm neurodivergent, and so my wife Sharon helps me to be a parent. And so I'm very open to being coached. If there's any question, she's just nearly always the one who's right. But dads who are struggling, I think, need other dads to get support and ideas from. And it's one of the things that's happened with the work of people doing what Elliot does, but with my books, people, thousands of, when my book Manhood came out, thousands of men's groups sprang up, and dads got together with other dads. And some of those men's groups are still going 25 years later. Some of their members have died of old age. Some of them have gone through all kinds of, some of them have changed gender, all kinds of things have happened. But men need to be around other men with their own space to discuss fathering and fatherhood. and to get out of where they're stuck. But at the same time, of course, when you're in bed at night time and you say, you kind of lost it with, the kids today. Was there something, are you under a bit of stress? And they say, oh, hell yeah, I'd had a really terrible time at work. I just had a headache and I'm sorry, but I shouted too loud at the kids, and they can own it and wear it if it's a not accusatory sort of vibe. And so when a couple works well as a team, they're always kind of coming back to that, are you okay? And actually, no, I'm not. And, I was, it could be both either way. I was pretty horrible to the kids. And it's never to do with the kids. This is the thing with parenthood. Our lives are, people have crap lives, and in Britain, you have the longest working hours in the world. You've had, a government for a long period of time that was just really not supportive of families. Hopefully that's changing, but it's tough. And so the big world hammers us, and then we're supposed to come home and be really kind of cool and chill with our children. There's a big battle. It's kind of community versus capitalism going on. And Elliot's, and both of you really in the front lines of that, saying, a good company respects parenting time. Everyone goes home at 5 o'clock. People have parental leave, maternity leave. There's a lot of this is not our faults. It's how horrible the world around us is. And so as a couple, we have to be like, this is hard. Remember, we love each other. Remember to laugh. And particularly what I say, have a think about the vibe in your house. What's happened to the vibe? Is yours a kitchen where people put on loud music and dance around the kitchen? Or is it a place with 15 to-do lists on the fridge and where people rush through as they go about, And have you got any say over that? Have your kids got too many activities going on? Is everyone in their bedrooms watching a screen? That's not a family. That's a boarding house.
Yeah. Creating moments for families to come together, I think, is really important in the modern world, because we do just tend to zone out and stare at screens sometimes. And just slightly flipping that, another question that I did get from people, and I struggle with this as well. One of my sons can get quite angry, and he struggles with the emotion of anger. And he's very honest about it. And he'll say, I can feel it. I can feel the anger coming, and I don't know what to do with it. And I don't know how to cope. And I never know what to say to him. He looks at me, sort of, help me. I don't know what to do with this emotion and how to handle it. And if I don't say anything, or I give him a big hug, and then, but he wants to punch something, and he wants to burn the house down. He wants to do the rage thing. What would you do in that scenario?
I'm going to try and answer this in a slightly more general way, because I'd want to take you as a family and spend 3 hours and we can't do that.
Can we not? I can come to Tasmania.
Later, Jolly, but not today, Jolly. And so there's a couple of things that happen. I've written a book just last year called Wild Creature Mind. And it's a book about how to use your body to get to the bottom of these strong, uncomfortable feelings. And so there's a few possibilities to float by with this. One is that in the wild creature approach, what you do is you say to your child, okay, let's just sit with this for a minute. And you sit down and you, as a parent, you kind of settle yourself and you breathe a bit and get into your body and settle into your body. And then you ask them, okay, so go into your body and whereabouts does this feeling live? And there's a form of words, and perhaps one day we can do a podcast just about this, because it's worth unpacking properly. But there is something in me that is angry is a better way to say it than I am angry. Yeah. And so, okay, there's something in me And so whereabouts does this feeling live? Call him Jeremy. Where does it live? And the children will know. They'll say, oh, it's tight around my heart, or it's in my tummy, or it's my shoulders and arms, or something like that. And you just sit with it and say, okay, it's in your shoulders, it's in your arms. I was sitting with a friend who'd lost his wife after 60 years of marriage, and he said, it's in my throat. I can just feel it's like my throat is like a stone. And as he just was able to sit with that and make space for it, suddenly this great sob came out of him, and he just cried for the first time and just was weeping. So it was one of the most moving things I've ever seen and been with, because our body has things going on, and it's working. The anger, if that's what it is there for a reason. Since being at home with mum is not a dangerous place and not a place where you're feeling boxed in, then it's very likely that it's not anger. And 90% of male anger is actually anxiety. And as males, there's a kind of a leaning to frame it as anger. And so I paint a picture again for people listening of a family, and they're at home on a Saturday morning, and there's a car skids outside the house. They hear a car skidding, and they go out the front door, and their dog has gone out on the street, and a car has crashed into their dog. And there's a dad and a little boy standing on the curb, and the little boy can see his beloved dog lying in the road. And the dad has come from the male background of the industrial era, and perhaps he's even been a soldier or a paramedic or something. And the little boy brims with tears. And if you're around a little boy who is around anyone who's having feelings, it stirs up your own feelings. And so the dad experiences, 1950s dad, 1970s dad even, I feel like I'm going to explode if I have these feelings, I don't know that I'll ever be sane again. And now that's not true. Feelings never take you anywhere bad, but he has to stop that feeling. And so he says to the boy, it's only a bloody dog, we'll get another bloody dog, snap out of it. The stupid dog should never run out here. It's own fault. And the little boy's going, buttoning it up, and on his way to being an explosive man, who's impossible to live with when he grows up. But if the dad comes from your generation, has a handle on this, he feels okay, and he crouches down beside the boy and puts his arm around and says, oh, this is just awful. She was a beautiful dog, and I know you loved her. This is the saddest thing. Look, let's bring her inside, and we'll see what we can do. And the boy and the dad are, going to getting the dog. And now the grief the little boy's feeling is very painful, but it's bearable because he's got someone alongside him. And we can manage anything. Human beings can handle anything as long as we've got someone holding space for us and with us. We're not. It's the aloneness that harms us. So we're learning what emotionally intelligent means. Is that when you're scared, you say I'm scared, and when you're sad, you say I'm sad, and when you're angry, you say excuse me, but you're in my way. And not that I'm going to break your nose. I worked with men on this kind of thing where you talk to the man about what's the first that you're angry, but what are the body signals that tell you you're angry? And I've had a man say to me, the first I know when I'm angry is when there is someone on the floor of the pub who I've just decked.
Oh, God.
It's like, I must be a little tense today. We're laughing. The males are 19 times more likely than females to end up in prison. When I want to get an audience galvanized, I draw two little babies on the whiteboard. Two tiny little babies, and they're totally identical. And I say, okay, you can't see any difference with these babies. But the baby on the right is 3 times more likely to die before they're 25.
Boys.
The baby on the right is 3 times more likely to be a drug addict. And they're 19 times more likely to go to jail. What's the difference between the 2 babies? The one on the right is a boy. And there are plenty of risk factors for being a girl as well. You know, lots of horrible statistics about being a girl in the mental health and being assaulted and things like that. But what the hell's going on? You know, that there's a 1900% imprisonment rate difference. And this is because we were a totally clueless society in how to get masculine energy and that beautiful life-affirming strength and courage and just plain energy and direct it into safe ways, you know, to build a life-affirming man instead of a life-destroying man.
This is incredible, Steve. I think you need to read like bedtime stories because your voice is amazing. So thank you for sharing your stories. When you're talking there about anger, I think about when I was a young boy. There were other boys in my school or people I used to hang around with, and some of them were quite angry, and they used to get into fights a lot and beat people up and stuff like that. And I think at the time they probably got a lot of respect from the other people around them. But as I've got older, I kind of feel sorry for them. Kind of feel like, why were you so angry? Like, why did that thing that wasn't that big a deal get you to the point where you were going to risk your freedom or risk being the victim of violence yourself? Like, why did you get to that point? And as I've grown up and kind of understood those people a lot more and seen their environment, what you're saying there rings true completely. Maybe they didn't have regulation in their life. They didn't have role models. They weren't able to do anything else with that energy. And it's really sad. And it's sad that when you spoke about labeling, right? Like we label anxiety as anger. Is that because we feel like it's more of an acceptable emotion to feel?
Yes. In a second, I can explain about role modeling and how it works. If you don't have role modeling as a boy, if you're not around good men and you don't see what a good man looks like, you're still going to turn into a male body. You know, 14 or 15, you're going to get big and strong. And so if you haven't got a deep inner experience of being male, how to do it, you have to make it up. And there are stock masks available. And if you grow up in a roughish neighborhood, then the standard stock mask is the tough guy. So you put on the tough guy role. There's the cool dude, you know, who is kind of fashion and everything. There's the funny guy who he's always laughing and making jokes. And very paradoxically, what we find is that those guys are often the suicide risk because they're so put out socially so different to their reality. So these masks are what happens when there isn't anything on the inside. Long ago, I used to get mums together, groups of about 200 mums in a room. And as a way to kind of create a bit of surprise at the start of the day, I would ask them a really challenging question. I'd say, let's design the perfect man. Jolie, you'll know, 200 women in a room, it's always
chaos.
There's some energy there. And so the first comments are very ribald and I just have to sort of, you know, try not to blush too much. As the only man there. And then people start calling out, okay, what's your perfect man? And the words start to come and I write them up on the board, you know, gentle, kind, funny, tender. And then there's another batch of words come, and it's reliable, trustworthy, goes the distance, keeps his promises. And the women who say, as they saying these words like trustworthy, the mood in the room changes, and you can see in the face of the woman who calls out trustworthy, she has experienced not trustworthy. And so there's a pain in her putting that forward. And on the board, the words separate in two sides of the board, just in a natural way. There are the kind, loving, gentle, funny, generous, and then there's the reliable, trustworthy, staunch, honest, enduring, and they're heart words and they're backbone words, because there's two sides to a good man. If you're raising a boy, you want him to have heart and backbone, because it'll get tested. When he's at a party when he's 16 and his mates are taking advantage of a girl who's had too much to drink, and they're just starting to, put their hands on her and treat her in a bad way. Your son, you want to be the one who says, cut it out, guys. She's had too much to drink. I'm going to call her mum and dad and get them to come and get her. And, when you're not around, when no one else is watching, we'll show backbone. And so to take this in little steps, does that make sense to you, Jolie? These kind of...
God, yeah, you're going to set me off again crying. But yes, absolutely. I don't know a single parent who doesn't want that for their sons.
Yes, it's important to see the one of those isn't enough. You can have a good heart, but if you haven't got backbone, you don't stick around for the tough things. A lot of 20th century men had backbone, but they didn't have heart. They stuck with the family and they stuck with the marriage, but they were just hard to be close to. And so we want both. And now, if any quality that you want your son to have, if you think about it, those things like tenderness and patience, they're quite complex. They're complex human behaviors. And you can't say to your boy, just be patient. Because how do you do that? Because if you break it down, patience is like, it's a way of breathing. It's like a way of dropping your shoulders and settling in and thinking, okay, I'm going to let this take the time that it takes. And I'll hold on to what it is I was wanting to ask, so I'll hold on to my purpose here. But I'm going to let go of any kind of rushingness about it. It's a physical, embodied place. And so it has to be learned. You have to have seen someone being patient. And if it's tenderness, you have to have seen tenderness and experienced, people being tender with you. And so role models are literally the way we become human. And so it means thousands of hours of being around. Boys used to only spend 6 minutes a day with their fathers interacting. When I first started raising boys, I got the Canadian studies that were done called Father Time. There were professors of Father Time in Canadian universities studying this. 6 minutes a day. If you don't include watching the telly, but wow. Talking and kicking a ball in the backyard or playing Scrabble or whatever it is. Going walking the dog together with dad and daughter or whatever it is. It's not enough. You have to hang out, do things, and so that he experiences, dad was really good with that, and dad was great. The dads are good. It's not just mums who are good to talk to. If mum's sick or something goes wrong, you can still talk to dad. And so there's much more commonality in mothering and fathering. And they're not the same, but they're not miles apart. And so I think in the Raising Boys book, that message, hang out, spend time with your children. Robert Bly said, even a mean man is sweet when he's teaching. And I think of one of my kids' grandfathers. He was such a grump, but when he got down to teach them how to take the wheel off a lawnmower or something, it was right there, yeah. And they remember that to this day.
How much control do you think we have over how they turn out? Like, what are the key things that we really, really can control, and what are the things we have to accept that we can't control?
Yeah, I think from the first day they go off to school, we're letting them into the world, and and the woundingness of the world. Now, the part of the problem is that community has just almost evaporated, but we've started, I think in the last 10, 20 years, we've started building back community. And, when Elliot works with dads in the workplace, or Jolie, when you've been organising mothers in the UK in some fantastic ways, you're building community. So because we're not meant to parent our kids, in any kind of isolation. You want your house to have other mums and other dads hanging out in the kitchen, telling your kids how great they are, and that's what community does, where they feel there's loads of adults, that can fill in. Elliot's list was a brilliant thing, a support team, 11 people that you could talk to.
I totally agree with this on community, and I've been thinking about this a lot as well in the UK, how we've lost youth clubs and we've lost places for kids to go to that was another form of that community. And I think that's a real detriment, actually, to kids and to parents, that there aren't many other sources of this community gathering for children and for families. Sure Start centres, things like that as well. We've decimated them in the last few years.
Yes, we have to get that back. We go camping with some other families that are friends of yours, so that the kids have long times of sitting with your best friend, or the lesbian auntie who just has a really different take on life to what they have, and different kinds of womanhood and different kinds of manhood, that they get a nice broad feeling of this. So if they want to do angry and strong, they think, all right, Auntie Christine is really angry and strong, So that's who I kind of mobilize when I want to do that. But the other thing is that until they are, 18 and 19 and going seriously out into the world, you do a lot of debriefing. And so they are saying to you, some kids showed me some yucky pictures at school. Your 8-year-old comes in and says some boys had some yucky pictures at school they were showing everyone, and you do a big sigh on the inside, and you sit down and you talk about that, and so that they have this feeling like you know what the world is like, what's out there. It's not a big drama, but it's important. There's some things to know about this. You take it seriously, and so that home is the kind of the place where you take off your armor from being out in the world. You leave your armor at the door, and you can be yourself. All the new wonderful studies about vulnerability that say how precious vulnerability is, where if mum says, guys, I'm really sorry, but today I'm just feeling really down because one of my friends has got breast cancer, and so if I'm not very cheerful or a lot of fun to be around, it's because I'm just thinking of her a lot. And the kids will be going like, wow, wow. And they'll be bringing you cups of tea, and Dad says, I really don't like my job very much. And I'm looking out for a better job. So if I've been a bit grumpy the last couple of weeks, it's because I've had a lot on my mind. And the little boy goes, Dad can talk about feeling vulnerable. The world doesn't disintegrate, he's still making my breakfast. But I feel that quite a lot, and so does Dad, and Dad's all right, and Dad's a big grown-up man. So it must be all right to be vulnerable.
Yeah, that's so important. Raising boys can feel really challenging for many parents right now. We get messages about it a lot, and it's one of the reasons why we started this podcast. But I'd be really interested to hear from you, Steve, as the Don of raising boys. No pressure. What gives you hope about the future and the next generation of boys?
Yeah, well, my most fun, happy place is, or one of them anyway, is kayaking. And I kayak on the big river that's near where I live. And out at the mouth of the river, there's a point. Sometimes the tide is going out, and it's a very strong tide. You have to really watch it. Sometimes it's coming in. But sometimes at the point where the tide is changing, where it's doing both at the same time, where it's coming in just there and it's going out just here, and you have to be really careful with your kayak, what you're doing. And I think that's where we're at. Masculinity is getting worse and it's getting better. 6 million people read Raising Boys. And I don't think I was that crash hot. I think it was just a time in history when people were open and where the whole world was saying, we can do better than this. So people began, 30 years ago, raising boys with more tenderness. Dads now don't spend 6 minutes a day. They spend at least 30 minutes a day. And that's an average. And so many guys are with their kids for hours a day. We've turned the corner. We've had a fathering revolution. And Jolie and Elliot, you're in the forefront of that. But the ones who are lost are really lost. They are so anxious. They're voting for tyrants in America and other places. They're disintegrating into violence. They're killing people in the shopping centres. It's awful and wonderful at the same time. Yeah. It's the point of where we just have to turn things around, and we've got to get help to males in whatever way we can, because we need their positive energy. We need their love. And women have carried the burden for too long, and we have to get them standing side by side. And so, as an old chap, I'm looking to you, everyone listening. I'm sending my love. You have listened to a podcast for an hour. You're a really caring parent to spend this time. I hope that I've given you things, and what you'll know is if it feels right, then that's my gift to you. If it doesn't feel right, out the window, that's okay. You'll find a better way. There's,
trust your instincts.
Yes. Listen to you.
Oh, Steve, that was just glorious. I honestly could listen to you all evening, but we can't because it's 11 p.m. But I will come to Tasmania and take you up on that 3 hours the family therapy. I'm
coming too, so it's 6 hours. I don't know your hourly fee, Steve, but I'm sure we'll sort it out.
I can take you for lunch.
Thank you so much. Honestly, been such an honour to have you on the podcast and to hear you speak. I've enjoyed every second, and I'm sure everybody listening has. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. I think I've been transported into Steve's world, and I really like it here. You're an amazing orator and communicator and writer, and just so many gems. So thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
It's delightful. Thank you, and love to everyone. Bye.